Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on turning training touchpoints into revenue streams. We are so glad you could join us. Thanks for taking time to be here. Before we dive into the conversation, just a quick housekeeping notes. Feel free to comment your questions for our speakers. There will be a dedicated Q&A session at the end. And not to worry about the presentation slides. We will be you'll be receiving the presentation slides in your inbox after the webinar. I guess that is all. With all that said, let's get into it. We are definitely thrilled to kick off today's conversation. Over to you, Jay.
All right. Thank you, Ankita. All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome again. I am Jay Kinker, CEO of Simply Train, a unified LMS that makes learning more aligned with your training business goals. So we help organizations turn training into real business advantage by making it measurable, scalable, and tied directly to revenue outcomes. And I'm thrilled to be joined with someone who is doing incredible work in the learning space. Jeff Campbell. Jeff is the founder of Incently, a platform that's changing how business approach user engagement through gamified incentive-driven learning. So with a strong focus on user experience and marketing outcomes, Jeff is all about helping organizations turn every learning interaction into growth opportunity. Jeff, welcome, and excited that you are here.
Thanks for having me, Jay. I'm super excited about today's conversation. I love the topic. I love the space, and I love how training can be used as a business driver. So I'm excited to chat with you about it today.
Lovely. Great. So let's quickly cover our today's agenda. So first, we'll cover what incentivized learning is all about and why it's more than just points and badges. Then we'll look at how to reframe training as a revenue strategy. Conventionally, training is seen as a cost to a company, and we are trying to see how training is seen as an investment for growth. So we'll explore ways training can drive customer loyalty and long-term value. And finally, we will walk through a few case studies and success stories from businesses that have seen measurable impact through this approach. All right, so that's the agenda for today. But let's start with the basics. So incentivized learning is a strategic approach to training, one that focuses on increasing learner engagements, improving performance, and boosting retention. But the key is it doesn't so by trying training activities or tangling rewards or clear outcomes. So think of it as 4 layers that we have listed here, which is behavioral activation, that is nudging the right actions at right time. Value-based rewards, offering meaningful incentives that go beyond gamification gimmicks. And gamified experiences, making learning interactive, fun, and sticky. And lastly, the performance-linked outcomes. So it's basically behavior changing through intrinsic motivation. So that's the approach. This approach isn't just for employees. It's specifically powerful for customer education, and that's what we are trying to cover today. Moving on. So today's customer, we all know that today's customer has shorter attention span and expect faster results. So that's not a surprise for any of us. And that leads to common challenges like poor product adoption or longer onboarding cycles or slow time to value. So this is where incentivized learning becomes more than nice to have. And that's what we are going to cover today, that how it's becoming essential in 2025. So quickly, let's cover the role of LMS. So now we are talking about incentivizing the learning. For this, you need a LMS which does more than just delivery content. So you can deliver content. So that's what we have been doing for ages. But a modern LMS becomes the engine that powers incentivized learning by combining automation, personalization, and behavioral intelligence. So at Simply Train, that's how we have support this model, which is integrated reward um, frameworks, personalized learning journey tailors to each user's goals, and automated incentive triggers that reward timely progress, or social recognition and real-time dashboards. And the last, but not the least, that why legacy LMS, if you are in one of those, that this becomes difficult. So this is where difference of legacy LMS versus modern LMS becomes very clear. So legacy systems are often content-centric, and that's how it has been all this while. And that's great for tracking completion, great for delivering the training, but not so much for engagement or business alignment. So modern LMS platforms like Simply Train are designed to deliver experiences driven by data, powered by AI, and tied directly to outcomes. And with that, I'd love to hand it over to Jeff, who's been helping organizations take a step further, transforming customer education from a traditional cost center into true revenue engine. Jeff will now take us through the strategic framework on the agenda for today, which is revolutionizing customer education from cost center to revenue engine. And this is especially relevant for LMS providers and training leaders looking to unlock business growth through smarter and more impactful learning strategies. Jeff, over to you.
Thanks, Jay. That was a great segue into to my part of the presentation. So thanks for that. And yes, as what Jay's speaking about is, I think it's important to start with clarifying what customer education is and how it's different than your traditional L&D training. And where I come at it from I'm going to say the loyalty of the incentivized part is to always recognize that in customer education, none of the training is mandatory. So that's a much different starting point in the mindset of the learner compared to the traditional internal employee training, where there is a requirement to actually consume the content. There are carrots and sticks in all training programs. And quite often in the L&D side, you look at there's consequences. It's more relying on, say, the sticks. And where it comes to customer education, we believe that the customers are, because they don't have to take the training, that you're really having to consider what is it that they're going to get out of your training, and then to be very cognizant that they have other things to do and you're really competing for their time. So by having them come into your training program, you need to reduce the friction and make it very easy for them to want to just take the first steps towards joining your program. So just even getting them in to register is really a huge barrier to overcome, because once they're in there, you're competing for their mental space and their time. So when we look at customer education and we compare it to that internal employee training, it really comes down to the lens that you're looking at it from or through. From the organization standpoint. And so when we look at the typical L&D and internal training side of the LMS world, is that's often looked at by senior leadership as a cost center, because it's one of those that have to spend money on it. We have to onboard people. We have to get them through their compliance training. We have to offer some upskilling, but it's really looked at and considered from senior leadership as a sunken cost. Versus if you expand your training program in your LMS to include your external audiences, which are your customers. And when I define customers, I think of everyone from distributors, wholesalers, franchises, associations, dealerships, all of these people that have a major influence and impact on the sales of your products and services, but are not employees and are not required to take that training. So when you open up the training to that side of your business, then it's really important that you look at the LMS and training through a different lens. You look at it not as a cost center, but really as a growth driver. And that's where I get really excited, because that's the work that I'm starting to see companies that are doing that and finding some tremendous success. So let me tell you a little more. First of all, when we consider that framework, that starting point of there's no requirement for these customers to come into your training portal, then we need to really look at, well, how can we reduce that friction and make them, first of all, sign up, then keep them coming back, and then lastly, help them spread the word. So we look at using two kind of main categories. We look at the psychological drivers behind doing that, as well as the reward mechanics. So from the psychological driver standpoint, we're looking at providing, obviously the content has to be good. It has to add value to them. That's table stakes. So I see a lot in the LMS and training world discussing the value of content. And for me, that's a given. I mean, it just has to be good. Of course, instructional design is a major part of that, and it needs to be, with your subject matter experts, that just has to be polished. But beyond that, then the consideration is giving the learner, the customer for that matter, the most autonomy, give them opportunities for mastery as well as purpose through what we like to call strategic motivational design. So you're really thinking about, how do we get these customers to get value, but to also take steps that are going to help them and help our business. And from the reward mechanics side, gamification has been around for a long time. So I think 2010 was when it kind of hit a major breakthrough. But back then it was points, badges, and leaders. We call that PBL. And it's still the main mechanism that we see in the gamification world. And where I got interested in that is I could see the potential behind it, but I didn't really think it was going to really relate to the engagement that I was after. And when I think engagement is an important word to define, because it's loosely thrown around. Everybody wants their customers to be engaged, but where I look at that is there's two parts of that. There's the customer engagement, but also the business value behind that. And so what are the customers doing, to get through, to register, to consume your content, and really you become connected emotionally to your brand? And then from the business who's making the investment side, what steps are you helping facilitate getting those customers to extract and find the most value from your products and services? And then, of course, to drive revenue, which ultimately leads to more support of that program. So we come at gamification slightly different. We've introduced a virtual currency into the LMS, which powers levels, which is really showing the thresholds and milestones of achievement that customers are making through your course catalog. And then we also have offered a variety of different reward types. So real rewards, which can be of really anything. And so when we talk about tangible rewards, it can be anything from company swag, but we get interested in where companies offer access to different professional opportunities. We give them status, so they can show off and demonstrate amongst their community about the achievements that they're making. And then we also include some incentives into the advocacy piece, so that you continue to build that marketing engine behind your program. And we're seeing some companies that are doing this and executing on it early, just in a mind-blowing way, really. And one of our largest manufacturing companies that we work with, who sells their products and services to distributors and wholesalers, they've adopted this program about 5 years ago. And since that time, we've seen their annual revenue increase by $600 million. They went from a $1.5 billion revenue to over $2.1 billion in those 5 years, adopting this strategy and really pushing on the training aspect and getting their brand out into those channels. So again, one caveat on that is there's a channel dependent companies that are looking to expand their product knowledge amongst their channel partners. So when we look at reframing the LMS from that looking at that lens, from that L&D lens, and changing it over into more of a growth lever and a revenue strategy, it's really important that we look at what are the pillars behind doing that from the LMS. And from the most basic saying I would put out there is that consider using your LMS as a marketing tool. Like, I really believe that LMS companies have been, most of them are positioning their tool as a training solution. And I think these companies that I'm working with are now starting to see their LMS as a marketing engine. And what I mean by that is when you place it in front of your customers and you look at it through a marketing and revenue lens, then what you're going to see is that you can start to leverage it for customer acquisition. Content has always been there, but we look at a loyalty program and a reward system being introduced, and that's going to facilitate more content consumption. As that content consumption increases, you're going to get your customers who understand your products and services more. They're better able to recommend and sell them. And then lastly, we can tie in an incentivized advocacy piece, which then you're going to collect referrals and you're going to get testimonials, which then can be repurposed in your other social channels. And ultimately, all of that leads to geographic expansion, more brand loyalty, and then ultimately you're going to see an increase in sales. So when we start to work with companies to do this, it's really important that we try and have conversations with the training team, but also bring in their marketing team and say, like, hey, have you guys thought about collaborating together and really pushing out this strategy together? And that's where we see the biggest benefits. And so from that, we really try and start with a marketing mindset, is that your LMS is going to be put out there to try and capture these customers to come in. So the first step we look at is really in that acquisition stage is registrations. Like, how do we push out registrations? And so one of the ways we do that is we simply put in, hey, you can earn some coins, some points for simply signing up. And as that goes out into the marketing message, you can start to then leverage that, as we call it, the coin economy, to push on. Maybe if there's certain times during the year that you see a drop in registrations, so you can increase that amount. So you can, just like most other companies that have promotional campaigns, you can do the same thing. So let's say August, you see a drop in registrations, you can add more points and promote that in your channels to drive those registrations. Once they're in, now we know a lot about them, and we can start to then offer different content about your products and services. And of course, we incentivize the content consumption there. And what we see is not only do we see more content being consumed, but we also see the same customers coming back and taking they're going to increase the amount of training that they take on a variety of products. So in the past, you can kind of measure, well, how many course completions do you typically get from a customer? And then when you incentivize it, it's double to triple the amount of content that's being consumed. So what you're getting then is a broader product understanding, which then obviously increases their ability to speak to those products or sell them or recommend them. Once that starts to happen, then we work with the company about creating more content about each new product that they roll out. And so that just increases the amount of upsells and cross-sells opportunities. And then lastly, as we have that library of content expanding, it allows these customers to have a reason to keep coming back in to consume more content as new products are being rolled out. And then lastly, we look at geographic expansion. So where are these companies operating in? And then where can we move to next to introduce this framework into new geographic locations? And I think the last bit on this slide that I want to talk about is the history of customer education. It's still very much rooted in SaaS and technology companies. Most of the customer education dialogue is around those SaaS companies. And if you think about it, if you're a company that's offering training for SaaS companies, you are looking at training through a customer success and retention lens. And that's a bit different because you're looking at it from a post-sale strategy, and it's really about retaining your clients or customers. And when we look at that, I just see so many more opportunities in the work that I'm doing with companies that work in other verticals. We're working with companies in manufacturing, in retail, in telecom, cosmetics, and all of those companies are selling their products and services to channel partners. And where we look at the difference then is that's looking through the lens again from marketing, is that how do we acquire more of these customers? How do we get them to consume more of our content when it's not required? The SaaS companies, typically when they sell their software, the training comes with it. The company that buys that software basically mandates that training to their employees. So it's not the company's training, but it's kind of mandated because it's purchased with that software. So I get excited about companies that are coming to us that are outside of the SaaS space, because this is where we see the incredible growth opportunities. So with that, I really think if you're kind of curious about what this might look like, is if we distill it from a marketing strategy standpoint, is there's a lot of companies that look at building a loyalty program, and that's essentially what it is. We see loyalty programs in airlines, we see them in retail spaces, we see them in restaurants. And so if you think about building a loyalty program in your training portal, it's the same marketing concepts that are coming across. So we look at, again, from that acquisition standpoint, once we get people in, then that strategic learning aspect, if I start on the top left of this cycle, offering product content and best practices around that product is certainly one aspect of what we see it being offered. But the other one is industry professional knowledge. So if your company can help your customers with professional knowledge, either certifications as well, that adds to the authority that your brand speaks to in the market, which then of course builds trust, and you're going to get more registrations coming in. So that's number one. We say add your own product content in there, but also industry best practices. From there, as your library of content continues to grow and you're putting your loyalty program at work, you're going to see customers that are coming back into your training portal to drive that content consumption, and then continue to feed off of new product information that you're putting out there or any new professional knowledge. From there, I'm seeing some companies that are starting to get excited about building a community. And I know with Simply Train, you have your LXP, which is a great place to have your customers come in to more of a community space where they can do what we call user-generated content, where they can share their own industry insights and professional knowledge. So it's not you as the company having to deliver content around some of these ideas. It's actually customer driven. And so you're empowering them. That's where the autonomy comes in. And if you tie in your loyalty system into that, so you reward the participation in there, rewarding upvotes is my favorite in there. So you're encouraging people to add value to the community. And then, of course, from that, you're building that brand loyalty. And you will, if you incentivize testimonials, you're really going to see your advocacy pick up. And then you could use that in your other marketing channels. From there, as you grow more, if you get more eyeballs on your content, you get more customers consuming that content, you're building that brand loyalty and that connection. They will choose and speak to your brand and your products over the competitors. And that's where we see that business growth. So one of the companies that I've been working with for the last 5 years, as I mentioned, is a global plumbing technology company. And we've seen them grow their business. So they came to us in 2019, and they had trouble getting customers to register in their LMS. So the entire year in 2019, they had 375 customers sign up to take their training. And they said, hey, do you think we can use this incentive and loyalty program to drive registrations and content consumption? And so since that time, by the way, they had 2,000 course completions back then. So fast forward 5 years later, and we've seen they've grown their program to over 50,000 learners and have completed over 250,000 course completions, which is amazing learning and training metrics. And those are leading indicators. And that's great. We're happy about that from the training department's team, from what they're measured on and what they care about. But ultimately, what we really care about is the bottom line and what is that revenue impact. And we've seen them grow their revenue, again, by $600 million annually since they've adopted that program. But the feedback I'm getting from companies that do this is really what this strategy does is it helps capture the mind share of your channel partners. And that's really something that's hard to put, like, how do you do that? Like so typical marketing strategies, your email campaigns, your sales reps are going to speak to your channel partners, but so are your competitors. And so if you think about it, how are you differentiating yourself from your competitors to really drive that channel engagement? And this is what we're seeing. And then if you look at the incentivized strategy, I often get asked about, how do we start or what would we do? And some people push back a little bit. Well, isn't this bribery? And I've thought about this a lot. I'm a former educator, and one of the things that you constantly struggle with in education or training is that people say, oh, you shouldn't offer rewards for training. But I come back to corporate training, and I constantly see it's really driven by carrots and sticks. Doesn't matter which training you look at. And I firmly believe in the customer training world, no one really wants to take your training. They are trading their time to consume your content. So I look at the loyalty programs and the rewards as really an appreciation and recognizing the time and the effort that your customers are putting into your content, to your training. And so looking at how that helps then align your business with the value that they're getting out of it. The loyalty system that we look at bringing in introduces on the 3 major steps. So behavioral activation is where we look at what can we do to incentivize the actions that these customers will take to drive value for them, but also drive business value for us. And so everything from registrations to course completions or program completions, but we can even start tying it together to purchase transactions on their e-commerce site, registering for your events. So you can start to build out a larger digital ecosystem of engagement that your customers, when they take these actions, you reward them for that. So you're building out beyond the LMS, you can start to really build out a much larger framework to activate your customers. When we bring in the gamification mechanics, as I mentioned, a virtual currency, which then can power levels, but it also helps to the currency is an exchange. Everyone understands it's an exchangeable item or object. And so what we can do is we can start to use it and bring in uncertainty. So we can add in sweepstakes or raffle draws or auctions. We can also introduce collaborative fundraiser activities, which has become a very popular one. So you can have customers contribute to a common goal. And then based on that setup of a reward system is that then the companies can really start to look at, well, what are the values that they have and how can our rewards reflect the values of our company and align that with the values of our customers? And so I like to think of the rewards as being ones that drive value for the customer. So maybe it helps them professionally or it helps them on their job. A good example of that with this global plumbing technology company that we work with is they typically have their customers installing their products in unfinished buildings. So one of the rewards that they offer is a camp chair. And if you think about it, these customers are coming to work in an unfinished building. There might not be a place to sit during their coffee or lunch breaks. So providing a reward from their training, which is a camp chair that they can bring to the job site, now they have a good place to sit with the branded logo on the back, which then they recognize this chair, this comfort that I'm getting I got it from the training that I've taken that's helped me on this job. So it's kind of the full circle of adding value to the customer's daily job from taking that training. Lastly, I'll say we do see some cultural differences depending on the different regions in the world and what people find valuable or appealing from the rewards catalog standpoint. So it is important that you think about your geographic locations and what your customers would be interested in. Looking at your starting point as well, it's important to look at what are your KPIs and what are you starting with? What is your data telling you right now? Just like I mentioned, the company that we worked with came to us and they said, hey, we're recognizing our registrations are low. So have a starting point, know what your numbers are, and then you can tell what the difference is when you start to add in some of these frameworks. Looking at your course completion rates is another easy one. So those two are typically where we start, just your registrations and your course completion rates. And then lastly, looking at what regions do you serve? What is your most likely successful region that you start with? And then identify what other geographic regions would you want to roll out into. Second, we look at that personalized rewards. I see a lot of companies when they think about loyalty programs, they think about offering gift cards, and it's shown gift cards have a very low efficacy in terms of building brand loyalty. Because I don't know about you, Jay, but I have a drawer full of gift cards that I don't even know where I got them from, and so I consider there's very little connection between getting a gift card and what company maybe gave it to me. And then the other part I don't like about that is reward, like my drawer full of unspent cards was really, it's not providing value to the company or the customer. And then lastly on that, you can see that gift cards can also purchase your competitors' products, which I don't think most companies want to do. So spending some time to offer think about ideas that offer personalized rewards. We think of the SAPS framework, which is status. Give your customers status, access, power, or stuff. That's the one that we really like. You can get creative around building that brand loyalty and giving them choice. So that's the biggest thing is not all customers are going to want the same things. So having a variety of opportunities for them, that's really what drives that engagement. And then lastly is looking at how do you connect that incentive and loyalty program to your marketing framework. So as we mentioned, so you can also start to add in things like refer a friend features, so you can reward people for referring their other customers to sign up for your training portal. I love the incentivized advocacy piece. So you can offer people coins for providing testimonials, video testimonials, images. That all comes back to your company that can be added into your marketing campaigns. And then, of course, automating is key as you get into large numbers of users and geographic expansion, as well as localization. That's all part of using an LMS that can support all of this. So lastly, our strategic takeaways is if you were to look at starting this, I want to really reiterate is start looking at your LMS as a marketing and business growth engine as opposed to a training solution. If you can get your marketing team to look at it, if you can get your senior leadership to look at this from, hey, we have an opportunity to acquire more customers, have them consume more of our content, build brand advocacy, I think that's a much easier talking point to get your company excited about doing this. Lastly, engagement metrics. So registration and course completions are really leading indicators. So they are going to precede that mind share capture that you're going to achieve, as well as as that content consumption and advocacy piece. Those things, the revenue will come after those things. Those metrics are being improved. We do see that incentives get customers in the door. You will see an increase in course completions and more conversions. Your sales teams will have an easier time approaching your channel partners. And then lastly, really think again about your LMS being a revenue driver and not a content warehouse. And so just to recap that our flagship project right now is really where we've seen an increase of 50,000 customers joining a portal over 5 years, over 250,000 course completions, and that has expanded into over 20 countries. And then, as I mentioned, we see a $600 million annual increase in revenue. And I'll leave with one of my favorite quotes about if you're into the customer space and you're thinking about how do you compete against your competitors and their products, is that really capturing mind share means capturing market share. So with that, Jay, I'll stop there because I think I've talked long enough here. So here we go. On to some questions.
Lovely. Thanks, Jeff. That was insightful. So guys, if you have any questions, you can put in the comments. Well, let's start with one of the questions, Jeff. You touched base on the LMS, so you can imagine that can be something that I would have picked. So a quick question on that one. Um, it's whatever you're saying makes sense, and it's not like it's a surprise, but much less LMS provides are focusing. So why do you think, or why do you believe customer education has been stuck in cost center mindset for so long? Why not so many LMS is putting much more spotlight on this aspect that we are just covering today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I know there's hundreds of LMS companies on the market, and I think most of them started in the EDU world and the corporate training world of just the internal employee training, and
Right.
those have typically been viewed as really a support function and essential. They've been looked at through the L&D, and the HR department has typically owned them, and where I think the shift is happening is we're seeing companies reposition their training as growth levers. And when we see that done right, we see the marketing teams getting involved. We see senior leadership getting excited about this, but because they understand that the training is going to increase your product adoption, it's going to improve your customer satisfaction, it drives revenue. And then, of course, embedding the incentives and loyalty program in there is really a marketing strategy. Put your branded items into your rewards program, and it just grows that or captures that mind share and really grows your business.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And that's why we have been investing in this area as well, and why we are talking today. Um, all right, let's go through the next questions then. All right, let's talk gamification. We did talk about you touched that aspect, and um, so this often gets dismissed as a fluff, right? So, but you've said that actually behavioral economics in action, that's what you cover. So, can you break down for us what do you mean in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the history of gamification has kind of been its Achilles heel is that points badges and leaderboards have been around for a long time. I think a lot of people also have had a poor experience with it at some point in the past. And the other part of that is that if you look at so the personalities or the personas of your customers, is that leaderboards are fairly irrelevant because they don't have a personal connection necessarily with many of the other customers. Badges to me are digital stickers. I don't see the value of it unless you're communicating some type of, I'm going to say, quasi certification. And then what's the point of points if you can't do anything with them? And so that whole model, I think, is old and let's say stale. And so where we've gone with adding virtual currencies and levels and real rewards is that we're trying to move towards more autonomy, so giving the customers some choice. There are some mastery loops that get very interesting when you leverage a coin economy. So you can have people take more than what's required of them, and then give them some purpose, attach their intrinsic motivations and their values with your companies, and see if you can make that alignment there. So when we layer in those new, I'm going to call them those new gamification mechanics, we're looking at aligning and aligning the customer behaviors with really the business goals. And so take that example that I shared with you is when you incentivize registrations and content consumption, we can see massive growth in both enrollments and your course completions. And then ultimately you see that increase in revenue. So that's how, when you see a company add $600 million of new annual revenue, I would argue it's hard to say that it's fluff.
Yeah, so the sales and marketing guys are going to love you for that. So 600 million, it's not a small amount. So that's massive. So so rightly put. So thanks for that. Let's move on. So let's touch on the LMS, and then we'll probably move to the another aspect of it again. So given all the topics that we are covering today, how should LMS buyers rethink their approach if they want to support this shift? Because we've talked about the legacy LMS versus the modern LMS. So when one is, especially the marketing teams, as you are putting it right way, or the customer training phase. So what should they prioritize while evaluating their next LMS platforms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because of the market being so vast with LMS opportunities or options, I think buyers need to stop evaluating platforms based purely on just features, and instead looking at like, what will this platform actually do to drive my business forward? And the leading indicators are, again, how does it help my learners, and how does it how does it increase that content consumption? And I think that's where the LMS needs to be looked at differently, instead of a course repository or a content library. It's really as, how does the LMS provider help you drive your business forward from a customer engagement standpoint, from personalization? How does it do it with analytics? And so I think, from a buyer standpoint, that's, to me, the differentiator that the LMSs can offer, is like, how do they really drive your business forward? Because if the buyer is having to justify their ROI to senior leadership, I feel like you're in a dangerous spot there to losing that customer to someone who's going to an LMS provider that's going to look at it from a, hey, let us be your partners and let us help drive your business forward through meaningful revenue growth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we talked about the LMS. So, I mean, you can imagine I'm biased there. So I thought to comment, but I won't comment how one should evaluate their next. And I can just say, Simplitrain is the best. It's a one-stop for your enterprise learning. So I'll leave it at that. But let's move to the next question, Jeff. You said that that's one interesting comment that you made earlier in your presentation, is that incentivized learning isn't bribery, right? So, and it's a strategic motivation. That's what you covered. So can you share the difference and how one should see this aspect of it?
Yeah, I get that a lot. In the education philosophy is really this, oh, you shouldn't provide rewards for learning. And I look at it from, if you look at the L&D space, if you look at the sticks side of the L&D space, whereas, okay, so if you look at onboarding training, well, what would happen if you did not do your onboarding training? Like, you just got your new job, but you're saying like, oh, I'm not going to do this, or it's not important to me. There are consequences for that. For compliance training, if you don't do your compliance training, there are consequences for your job there. And if you don't do your upskilling, well, upskilling has, of course, the benefit of job promotion, job mobility, and of course, raises associated with that. So there are some carrots in there as well. And so I look at all training has either carrots or sticks in it. When it comes to customers, I think it's really hard to use sticks. They're like, what are the consequences for a customer who does not have to take your training? There's no consequence. And so we look at, what are the ways, like, if I'm a customer and I know your brand, I know you've got some training there, what is going to compel me to come into your training offering and not only register, but also to consume your content and to come back to it on a regular basis? And so absolutely, you need a marketing, you need awareness a system, you need a reminder system, but it still doesn't change the fact that these customers are going to be trading their time and their mental effort to spend on your products and services. So I think from a business standpoint, you need to be very aware of what is it that you're asking of your customers. And so I look at the loyalty and reward system as really being a recognition system. It's recognizing, hey, thank you for taking our training. Thank you for spending the time learning about our products and services. And we're going to offer something, we're exchanging that time and that effort for something that's going to build our connection and emotional connection, make it more personal, that's how you connect with humans. That's how you build your business and build a loyal customer base that's going to recommend your products and services over the competitors.
Right. Yeah, agree. And I like the framing, Jeff, that respecting the learner's time, because that's a big deal. I mean, people don't have the time, you don't get the attention easily. And especially when your audience is, especially these days, juggling in a million things and still choose to engage with your training. So that becomes critical. All right.
Absolutely. And they might have their own required training that they have to do. So you're asking
Yes.
them to do more of your company. So I really don't think many learning professionals or companies think about what the ask is of your customers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And onboard training, and so all the touch points, that's very, very sensitive. And we have seen the consequences if one, especially it's a software or hardware, if you're not doing wisely onboard training itself, if the training is missed, you know the consequence of what happens. It results in a lot of unhappiness
Yes.
versus when it is really done. Right. So, okay. So the last question then, Jeff, I think we are about time. So last question. So what's the long game here? How does this strategy help companies build long-term customer loyalty? So that's what we have covered today. So it would be good if you can summarize that in the end.
Yeah, I think the biggest part is empowering your customers. And, when you have them feel that autonomy where they can take different courses about different products, they become invested, obviously trained about your product. You build that brand recognition, and all that leads to the buyer. It's shown, the studies show in customer education that educated customers will buy more. They'll buy more often. They'll buy more, like a higher dollar of value from you. They will reduce their dependence on your support because they're more autonomous. You can build out your geographic expansion with this model. And ultimately, you get longer term value customers. They'll stay with you longer. They'll upgrade faster. They're going to refer others. They become your brand champions. It's really about building relationships and moving past the transactional nature of some of the training programs that are out there. And overall, it becomes really part of your marketing strategy. It touches on, of course, that customer success, but ultimately it boils down to a revenue strategy. It's a revenue enablement framework.
True. Yeah. Great. So yeah, that's fair. And that's the dream, as you're saying, Jeff, and not just teaching them how to use your product, but helping them succeed with it. That's even more loyalty. You can have the best of the product and still fail. So that's where the loyalty and lifetime value comes in picture. And the learning platform, it's great that we covered one aspect of it and how one can see learning with marketing. So that's lovely. So
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you so much, Jeff, for all your time. But before we wrap up, here's something exciting for all our sales and marketing community that we are trying to do. And in today's conversation, if today's conversation sparked your interest in how to leverage your existing LMS or customer training model, then don't miss the chance to book a one-on-one strategy session. You'll see the link in the comment just about now. And in this personalized session, we'll show you how to turn every training touch point into a sales opportunity, whether it's onboarding, certification, training academy, or resource hub that we covered today. And you learn how to map customer training content to buyer journey, how to capture qualified leads through gated learning, and how to engagement data, identify upsell and cross-sell moments. So whether you're running customer education, partner enablement, this session will help you align learning pipeline growth. So grab a spot in our calendar. The link will be there in the comments. And thank you so much, Jeff, for your time today and education today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jay. I really enjoyed our
Thank you.
conversation and look forward to having more.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it one more very soon then. All right.
Sounds great. Thanks again. Thanks
All
everyone for
right.
coming.
Goodbye, everybody. Happy training.